I think one of the things that I always reflect on is the fact that the JSE has actually walked a journey hand by hand with the development of Johannesburg. We were established just 1 year after gold was discovered in the city, in a small mining camp, which then became a stable in a mining area. So we are almost as old as the city itself. And since then, we've made so many strides as a business. As a starting point, we were established to provide capital to mining, and I think that we can actually claim that we have played a role in the development of the country as a mining superpower. So much has happened in the last 135 years. We've grown from strength to strength, offering a variety of products. We have become a globally connected exchange, the largest in Africa, offering a variety of products and services. And I would say that we've made so many developments from an innovation perspective. In 1996, we had Outcry. We no longer have Outcry. We digitized our clearing house. We're looking at different ways of offering capital to companies. And I'm really proud of the role that we play in the development of the economy.
Let's build on that then. What do you count as the successes of the JSEs when you look back at the past few years?
Well, I would say that from year to year, we've grown as a JSE in size. We've acquired different types of businesses to expand our offering, so the bond exchange, the futures exchange as well. Recently, we've acquired JSE Investor Services. We've provided share administration services for organizations that are listed. We've got our JSE Private Placement business, which provides capital to SMEs, which I think is fantastic because then we are contributing to the growth of SMEs in South Africa. But before then, we had the AltX, which is called the Growth Fund, which has actually had quite a few big graduates in there. If you think of the likes of Capitec, who've come through the Growth Fund and are now sitting on the main board. Looking at the JSE, we have become one of the largest exchanges, which I think is a great achievement by itself. Our market capitalization is 22 trillion, which is almost 3 times the size of South Africa's GDP. So we are punching above our weight. On the development side, I do think we've made some huge strides from a sustainability perspective. We are one of the first exchanges to actually launch a sustainability index. We are the first exchange to also launch disclosure guidances for companies to understand how they can actually disclose on the climate change and ESG activities. And we've launched a transition bond, which allows for companies to raise funds so that they can make the transition from carbon heavy emissions to carbon neutral. So all in all, I think it's great. If you look at our exco, I do think we've made huge transitions on the transformation side. There's about 80% of us female at the exco, 66% on the board. And we are looking at how we represent across the organization. But from a transformation and gender equality perspective, I think we've made massive strides there.
You recently outlined proposed amendments to the listing requirements. What necessitated that feedback from market participants?
I think the starting point is, as the JSE, we always aspire to have a fair, transparent and efficient market, but at the same time it needs to become competitive. So we made those changes in recognition that the global regulatory environment is shifting, and we need to make sure that we have the right balance between becoming a regulator but also placing an onus on listed organizations from that disclosure perspective and meeting the listing requirements. So some of those activities looked at how can we reduce red tape to enhance the attractiveness of the JSE as a listed organization, as a listing destination, both locally and internationally. So we've made changes such as introducing dual class shares. We've looked at free float, reducing the free float to 10%, whereas it was 20%, because we looked at what was happening internationally in the US and in the EU area. So we've done that. And we've also looked at how we structure things like SPACs. So we're keeping abreast of what's happening in the markets and making sure that, as I said earlier on, we get the balance right.
So you're working with peer exchanges to market South Africa as an investment destination. What has been the feedback so far with some of the exchanges? Recently, you guys were in New York. Tell us about that.
So every year we go out to markets in the US and in the UK to talk about South Africa as an attractive destination, but most importantly as the emerging market destination. We do work with different exchanges, for example, Singapore, New York, Australia, to have dual listing, to attract dual listings and have a fast track for companies that wish to list in South Africa. In our South African SA Tomorrow conference, we meet with investors to talk about some of the benefits of investing in South African companies. And some of the feedback has been quite positive. I think there is recognition that in South Africa we do have challenges as a nation, looking at our economic growth and the levels of employment. But what is positive from the investors is that we are giving them a bit of a roadmap in terms of how we're going to address those issues. Some of the questions has been about how we're managing inflation. I do think from a Reserve Bank perspective, we have been lauded for being quick to actually address that from the onset. There have been questions obviously about Eskom, and because that affects the sustainability and stability of businesses. So we've been talking a bit more about what are the different reforms that Eskom will undertake. And then I think one of the topics also talks about the grey listing that we are facing. So what are we doing as an organization, and also our climate change transition. All in all, there's feedback has been positive, and I think having a company like the NYSE want to partner with us to see how we can launch new products together and how we can share ideas is very encouraging. It also talks to how the JSE is seen internationally.
Looking to the future, what's next for the JSE?
I think the sky is the limit. We are looking at growing from strength to strength, but we also need to go back to basics. So we're looking at growing our core business and making sure that we retain our operational resilience so that we can continue to be present in the market all the time. JIS, which is our investor services and private placements, are still our primary growth nodes for now. We are looking at how we can grow them, and then we're looking at other opportunities from an asset perspective. So what kind of new assets we can introduce, and digitizing our businesses as well, and improving our international footprint. But I think most importantly, we do recognize as a JSE the role that we play, not only just in the capital markets, but in South Africa as a whole. So we do take pride in looking at more partnerships with market participants and our social partners to see how we can develop the economy and how we can drive for true financial inclusion in South Africa.